So in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 of the most powerful and influential books that have impacted me professionally as a therapist, as a counselor, as a Chinese medicine practitioner, and an EFT practitioner. So hopefully in this video, I can share with you some wisdom if you haven't already come across these books, or if you haven't, then maybe it's worth checking these out. Okay, so let's get into them. So number 1 is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. Right. So this book comes up in all different kinds of circles, from entrepreneurs, particularly for artists. It was written about writers particularly, and from a writer. But it's also very influential in any space that you're in. The War of Art is basically, he's describing that resistance is a natural part of the human experience. And learning to understand what resistance is and learning to work with it. And it gives you a bunch of strategies to work with it so that you can basically overcome resistance. And this is applying to anyone who struggles with procrastination, struggling to make a video, for YouTube like this. There's an element of resistance to this, right? So a book like this will help you understand that it's actually very normal to have resistance, particularly to new things. And so it's not a sign that you've done something wrong or you're on the wrong path. And I think that's the biggest catch. And I see this all the time. There's kind of a new age teaching that everything should feel easy all the time. And that's not necessarily the case, particularly when you're trying new things. There's always an element of struggle, resistance, or stress whenever you try new things. It's normal. Right? So if you understand that resistance is actually normal, particularly with certain things, is that you don't then pull out or sabotage the situation or judge something that's wrong or you're off track. No, resistance is there. Even in some cases, it's a good sign. Resistance is a good sign if you know how to, transverse it, if you know how to dissolve it, if you know how to work with it, right? So this will change your life if you haven't read this book, The War of Art. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, this is The Secret of the Golden Flower by Thomas Cleary. This is a Taoist text. So the most famous Taoist text is the Tao Te Ching, and that's what most people are aware of, and that's kind of as far as they kind of get. Maybe they get to the I Ching, but very rarely I've noticed people get to The Secret of the Golden Flower. The Secret of the Golden Flower is more about the practices of awakening the inner golden flower, they call it. So it's encompassing exercise. It talks about diet. It talks about Qigong. It talks about meditation. It talks about all the different lifestyle factors about how to live in a certain way, where then the internal golden flower, which is awakening or healing, comes on naturally, right? And it's written in a very poetic type of language. I love this type of language. It's just so beautiful and less like scientific heavy. I find science books are okay, but man, they're a bit boring sometimes. And it's just so much science babble. Whereas what I really like about Eastern medicine, particularly Chinese medicine, is that it's more metaphorical and more poetic and natural, right? And so this book it totally describes how to live as a sage or as a harmonious, healthy human being. And it's just so beautiful. So I love this book and I highly recommend it. There's lots of translations. This one, I'm just so happy with this. I haven't really looked at other translations, to be honest. The next book, number 3, I don't have a copy with me right now, but it's the Autobiography of a Yogi. One of the most famous books ever written within the yogic field, and highly recommended, written by Yogananda, who was a yogic saint, who basically was one of the people who brought yoga to the West in the 70s, maybe 60s. And basically it's how he grew up in India, all the things he encountered, how he met his master, etc., etc., etc. This book, I read it when I was 19, and it completely blew my mind because it shows you what's possible for the human being. You know, he talks about psychic potential. He talks about, you know, dematerialization. So you can actually dematerialize your body and reappear in a different location, right? All these different states of consciousness, he explains. And yoga, I find, is very scientific and very grounded science. Whereas a lot of the New Age teachings and different interpretations of it tend to be a bit more woo-woo or a bit more flowery. And I get a bit put off by that. But Yogananda's book, Autobiography of Yogi, I find delivered in such a powerful, grounded way that is so inspiring, essentially, because it shows you what's possible. Okay, so that's that book. The next book, number 4, I don't have a copy on me right now. This is Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. These series of books, so he wrote a series of books. He passed away in 2012. It really started with the book Power versus Force, the hidden determinants of human behavior. And it explains a process that he went through using applied kinesiology or muscle testing to work out what frequencies or vibrations certain things in our world were resonating at. Highly recommend it. It totally changed the way I saw everything. One of the most impactful teachings from it, understandings I got from it, is particularly about different medicines and modalities. So every modality is at a certain level of frequency of truth, right? Some medicines are more scientific, some medicines are less scientific. Some medicines are very almost spiritual, other medicines are not spiritual, right? Some of the teachers behind certain medicines are not very high, and other teachers are very high. So in parts of the book, he touches upon this, and in his further books, he actually breaks it down and gives you different placings. But this is really helpful, and will explain why some medicines work for some people and other medicines don't, right? Where does chiropractics fit into the story? Where does Reiki fit? Where does EFT fit, right? Where does Chinese medicine fit? Where does pharmacology fit, right? Where does psychiatry fit? So they're all at different levels of truth, different frequencies, and depending on that and depending on the illness that's being treated, that's the relationship. So the ideal situation is you've got an illness and the treatment is a few frequencies higher, like a level or two higher. And that will tend to work better than if you bring in a type of medicine that's like way too high and the disease is really low, it's too far a jump. So often that disease or that treatment won't work. Or if the treatment is lower, you know, quite low on the spectrum, it won't work. So these are just some of the things you can learn. But to learn the foundation of this understanding, check out the book Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. Okay, so number 5. Now this is a bit heavier. This is Chinese medicine related. This is the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, talks in more poetic, metaphorical language. And this book is heavy with that. Ideally, you read something a bit easier, potentially, like The Web That Has No Weaver or other Chinese medicine books that are probably written by Westerners, right? And then that'll give you a sort of introduction to it. But if you've already done that, then maybe you could try reading this. It's just chock full of information. And this is one of the oldest texts that they discovered on Chinese medicine. So yeah, very powerful, very interesting insight into how they used to live back in China. So that's my top 5, and I wanted to give you a bonus. So number 6, the bonus one, is called The Millionaire Master Plan. was his name, Roger James Hamilton. Now, this is the reason I bring this up. I know it sounds like a business book, and it is a business book, but what's really cool about this is that he's broken it down into 7 primary levels. And if you look at it from the deep red to the purple, that's the chakras. And that's what he's talking about, is that if you're at this level of existence and business, for example, you're kind of living in a particular state, which he calls like survival level. And this is be the way you're thinking, the way you deal with money, the way you look at work, right? And the goal is, and he takes you through it, you can do an assessment inside the book to work out where you are, is you want to work out where you are in the path, and then basically find out where you're blocked, and then what's the next level. So if I'm blocked at solar plexus level, usually around this part, actually solar plexus, if I remember correctly, you're starting to make good money around the solar plexus. You're out of survival and you're more like functioning quite well in the world. And so how do you keep going? And so he will give you tips and advice and strategies of how to move up. And a lot of people I see struggle with this is they don't know where they are. And everyone's problems are different, right? Depending on where you are. So to give out blanket advice, like on the internet or whatever, right? It's people posting all this random stuff, is that first you need to work out where you are, and then you'll get the tips related to you, right? So this is actually very cool. So it's a mix of spirituality and modern business skills. And this helped me immensely, and it still does. I refer to it all the time. So that's it. There's my 6 highly recommended books to empower your career, whether you're a therapist or a healer or looking to get into the space. If you want more information, be sure to subscribe, check out my website, and I look forward to seeing you next time.